We all rely on farmers and ranchers, but farming is riskier than other businesses out there. Crop insurance helps farmers manage their risk. With crop insurance, farmers put skin in the game by paying premiums and shouldering deductibles. That keeps taxpayers from having to pick up the whole bill every time disaster strikes. Today, about 90% of U.S. farmland is insured, providing $100 billion in protection to more than 130 different kinds of crops. It's a testament to the program's success.
Thank you for joining us for our Agri-Pulse Washington Week in Review on location in Kansas City this week at the National Association of Farm Broadcasting Annual Convention. I'm Spencer Chase, joined this week by Agri-Pulse editor and publisher Sarah Wyant, discussing the week that was, agriculturally speaking, in Washington, D.C. and across the country. As I mentioned previously, we are here at the National Association of Farm Broadcasting's annual convention in Kansas City. Always a great event. See a lot of great friends, both in ag media and really in the broader agricultural policy space. But it was while we were here that a number of us got notifications on our phones, in our email, etc., that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi offering some of the strongest commentary that she has to this point about the progress of the U.S. Mexico-Canada Agreement. She telling reporters today that the deal, or consideration of the deal, is imminent. We've heard her many times say that they were on a continuing path to yes, some form of that language. But Sarah, we're talking to a lot of people here this week about what they see as the prospects for USMCA. A lot of them very optimistic about this bill's chances once it gets to Capitol Hill and receives House consideration.
Well, as you mentioned, Spencer, this really is where all the top trade associations come for one day for trade talk to share the latest and greatest from their perspectives. And I'd say that everyone I talked to on USMCA felt optimistic that it should be done and can be done, but there's always that consideration that as we watch these impeachment hearings, you can see a lot of the oxygen being sucked out of the room, and especially those trade officials here that I talked to and some of the folks with the different industry associations. They remember back to the last impeachment proceedings, and they remember how difficult that was for staff to continue to stay focused on big issues like USMCA. So they're a little hesitant because of that, and especially as the timetable is winding down with just a couple weeks left for Congress to be in session. So all of those factors combined, I think overall people are optimistic, but it's kind of, we're going to really wait and see.
So did a number of interviews here today, and I've lost count of how many times folks said that they really want this deal passed before the end of the year. And in their mind, December 31st and January 1st are only 24 hours apart, but a huge level of significance for them in passage of this deal potentially before the end of the year here.
Yes.
And so another thing to kind of keep in mind, a question I was able to ask a few folks was whether or not this impeachment process is helping or hurting consideration of the U.S. Mexico-Canada Agreement. On one hand, as you mentioned, is sucking up a lot of that legislative oxygen. On the other hand, it also provides House Democrats with an opportunity to say that they can in fact govern. And so, yes. It's like whenever anybody asks me about the election process, I say we're all going to be a lot smarter a year from now. Maybe we'll be a lot smarter a month from now with USMCA.
You know, absolutely. As we've watched farm bills, as we've watched other pieces of legislation pass, when there is the political will to do so, it can happen, and it can happen relatively quickly. So the comments from Speaker Pelosi were very welcome that maybe things are moving behind the scenes faster than we can see above the fray.
So another topic that's been a very hot topic here in Kansas City is the trade dispute between the United States and China, and saw some development on that here this week, today as a matter of fact. And when we saw the China announce that it was going to allow for imports of U.S. poultry following similar action from an opposite perspective from the United States. So obviously this has been something that's been going on for a long time. We're starting to see a little bit of a thawing in the very tense relationship between the U.S. and China.
It appears that way. We also saw some rather cautious press reports early in the week that suggested that until some of the tariffs are going to be removed in this phase one agreement, that the Chinese aren't willing to budge. So we're going to be watching that carefully. I also think that this movement on poultry is very significant because it's been a long time in the making. It's been 5 years since we've been able to send poultry, and that's a really important product not only for the Chinese but for our markets. And so as one person shared with me today, there's been a promise to export 40 to 50 billion of U.S. farm exports to the Chinese. And that person was saying, well, 1 billion down, we only got 49 to go.
So we're almost there. We're getting there, yeah.
It's progress.
Yeah. So I want to close up on another item on the trade frontier this week. Earlier this week, we saw an announcement that was confirmed today by the Trump administration of Brazil making room for United States wheat and a tariff rate quota, a TRQ that was about 24 years in the making, but now will allow for additional exports of United States, United States in theory, but specifically countries outside of a trade pact in Brazil, but really opens up a huge export avenue for United States wheat producers.
Absolutely. It's a huge story. You did a great job writing that on Monday, and it was nice to have it confirmed today by the administration. So it's again, these movements on trade are going to, I believe, lift the spirits of so many producers who've been hampered financially, not only by the trade deals, but a bad weather year, everything from too much water to storms and early snow. Everything we can do to start moving more product overseas is going to help lift all boats.
Mm-hmm. So that's another trade item to watch here this week. Another thing to keep in mind next week is the current end of government funding. We do expect the House to consider a continuing resolution moving that government funding deadline into December. As a reminder, next week is kind of the last week they're going to be in session before Thanksgiving, and then after that, just a couple of legislative weeks in December. So it's getting to be go time in Washington D.C. A lot of legislators and staffers going to start really putting pound to pavement here pretty soon, but we'll be sure to keep you up to date on all of the news and events that are not specifically related to impeachment in Washington, D.C. At Agri-Pulse.com. But for Sarah Wyant, I'm Spencer Chase. Have a good one.